Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Tzadik Beis and Baba Metzias. We went for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael and soon about Tzara V'Shivya. Says the Mishnah. We saw the Mishnah yesterday. We'll repeat it quickly. Ochel Poel Kishus Afilu B'Dinner. A Poel, Torah allowed the worker to eat, as we learned yesterday, of the food that he is processing, that he is harvesting, or the food that he is processing before it's fully processed, before it's chayiv and meiser. So he's allowed to eat the cucumbers, even if they cost a lot of money, like a cucumber that costs like a nickel, even if it's worth $1. Kasevas or dates, even if they're worth a lot of money, $1. He shouldn't eat more than his wages. The Chum say you're allowed to. The Gemara will explain what's in the Chum and the Tanakama. But the Chum add of a malam ben asad, you teach a person and you shouldn't be a glutton. In other words, he can eat. The truth is, he can eat all he wants. But if he eats more than his wages, he's not going to get hired. Says the Gemara right away. What's in between the Chum and Tanakama? Either way, both of them seem to say that a kohen could eat whatever. You don't look at how much the food costs, even if it's more than his wages. So the Gemara says, the Chum add on. Chum basically agree with the Tanakama. You eat all you want, even if it's more than your wages. But we teach him, don't eat too much, otherwise you won't get hired. The Tanakama, less late. The Tanakama doesn't hold less than he doesn't. You have to teach him. Just let him eat whatever he wants. So Rabbanan Islu Malam. The Rabbanan hold the Malam that you teach him. Yes, you can do all you want, but we try to encourage him not to do too much. Iboy saying keep an eye on the machlokas is Ravasi. Ravasi said halacha, which is said in two forms. Dam Ravasi there's a Tanakama holds of Ravasi's halacha. What is that? Let's say he was only hired to harvest one bunch of grapes. Ochla, he could eat that grapes. He was hired just to harvest one bunch. Just take that one bunch. That's your job for the day. He can eat that whole bunch too, and not give the balabais anything. Ravasi said it in another form. In another form, he said, even if he had only harvested one. In the first case, he was only hired to harvest the one bunch. Here he said he was hired for the whole day, but the first bunch that he harvested, he can eat that. Why do you have to say it in both ways? The first way, there's nothing to put into the balabais. Of course, there he can eat because he was hired to work to harvest one bunch, and that's all there is. So there's nothing else to eat. So obviously, he can eat that. But if there's plenty of food, he's hired for the whole day. Maybe he should first put something into the basket of the balabais, harvest for your owner, for your boss. And then that's what I might think. Kamashma, no, that even if you're hired for the whole day, you could start eating right away the first bunch. And you'll tell me, if you tell me the second case, where he was hired for the whole day, he's entitled to eat the first bunch. You know why? Because okay, he'll get for the balabais, he'll put in the basket the stuff that he picks later. If he's not able to bring the balabais home anything, the guy hires him to harvest a bunch of grapes, one big bunch, and if he eats that bunch, he'll be bringing in nothing for the balabais. So maybe he's not entitled to eat. Maybe where you entitled to eat, or you're picking basically for the balabais, and you could eat some yourself. But if you're going to eat everything yourself and give him nothing, maybe you can't do that. Kamashma, you're still allowed to. So the Tanakama holds of that. The Tanakama says, yeah, even if that's all there is, one bunch or the first bunch, you can eat that. Rabbi says, no, you can't eat. Rabbi says, whether you're picking that or picking much, you can only eat up to your wages. You can't eat more. And the Rabbanan sheet is, no, you're allowed to if he's a skayom. But if you only are hired for one bunch, then he doesn't know about us. You can't do it. That can be the machlokes in Tanakama and the Rabbanan. The Chum say you're allowed to, but not if you only hire for one bunch, maybe you can't. Maybe they wouldn't hold the Ravasi's halacha. Maybe for tzedakah. Why would you hire somebody to do that? Maybe you just wanted to give him a job. You really don't want any grapes. Whatever his reason was, right? Or maybe he thought that if you're only entitled to, well, if there's only one bunch, maybe I'm going to get it. If I'm the balabais, I didn't know the halacha that he's allowed to eat whatever he wants. Maybe he didn't know. Ibai Seima, Ikbinayu to Rav. Maybe the machlokas is, do they hold the Rav? What do you mean to Rav? Rav says like this, Matzati Megillas Starim. I found a hidden Megillah. What is a hidden Megillah? Rashi tells an interesting thing. It's a hidden Megillah that you're not allowed to write down halachas. Torah Shabbat Peh, you're not allowed to write down. And now after Rebbe came along and wrote it all down, organized it, so otherwise we wouldn't have a Gemara, we wouldn't remember everything. But until that time, Rav said he found a Megillah Star, Bei Rav Chia, in the house of Rav Chia, in the yeshiva of Rav Chia. And what is a Megillah Star? That a guy wrote something down because he thought he wouldn't remember it. You're not supposed to. He was afraid of forgetting it. He would write it down and then hide it because you're not supposed to have an open, written down Torah Shabbat Peh in those days. So he found the Megillah Star in Bei Rav Chia. Because of it says like this. Isi ben Yehuda Mishnah says, if you come into your neighbor's vineyard, because anybody can come in. Did it say worker? We darshan that it meant worker. We had that Gemara before. Kisavo, that means worker. But Rav Isi ben Yehuda said, no, anybody can come in and eat there. Rav says, Lo shafki isi chay l'chober, nobody's allowed to live. If anybody can come into your field and just take whatever they want, so what kind of a life is that? What is ownership? What is anything? He says, you're not letting anybody live. Okay, that would be the nafkamina between the two. Tanakama doesn't hold the Rav Isi. Tanakama says you can eat more than your wages, but you can't go in. Not anybody can go in, only the worker. As the Tanakama says, Ochel Poel, a worker, Kishus, Afila B'din. You can eat no matter how much the food that you're eating is worth, even if it's more than your wages, much more than your wages, you can eat it. Right? That's who maybe Rav who says the way Rav understood Isi ben Yehuda, the way Rav understood Isi ben Rashi says that Tanakama doesn't hold the Rav Isi because he says Poel. The Rabban Basrai say they hold the Isi, and that's how Rav understood him. Rav understood Isi like the Rabbanan, that you can eat whatever you want. Anybody can come in. Rav Ashi then went and said, I'm recently Shmaita Commander of Khan. I mentioned this teaching of Isi ben Yehuda, that Isi ben Yehuda learns that anybody can come into the field and eat. I mentioned it before of Kana. Amrli is a Gersa, and he told me, Amrli, Dilma, maybe Rav Kana, maybe Ravashi, rather Isi, maybe Isi meant Dilma Ba'osim B'Sirasan, the Abdu Bachu. Maybe what Isi meant was anybody can come in and work the field and eat if they're eating it in turn for work. In other words, nobody can just come in and take food out of your yard and just eat it. Stop. And maybe he meant anybody can come in, work the field, and in return for working, they can eat. Amrli, in other words, Rav Ashi said, I said this before of Kana, and Amrli said, Dilma ba'osim b'sudasan, the avdu achlu. If a Rav will argue, that's his gears of Rav will argue, a person would rather hire his own workers to harvest his orchard. He doesn't want everybody to come in and eat whatever they want. In other words, Rav Asi said, Rav Isi ben Yehuda said the strange thing, that anybody can come into your field and eat. So Rav Ashi said maybe he meant anybody can come into the field on their own, eat and work. But Rav, who says you're not letting anybody live, why is Rav saying you're not letting any owner live because anybody can come in and eat from his field? He says, what did Rav mean by that? The guy's working. The answer is you would rather hire your own workers and understand if they can work and pay them and have them work rather than have anybody who wants to just come into my field and work the field and eat all they want. Person would rather have that. So that's why Rav said that what Isi said is a very difficult thing. Rav Ashi tried to defend it, but that wasn't a good defense. In any case, what does that have to do with our Gemara? Because we're trying to make enough between Tanakama and the Chachamim, and we'll say that the Tanakama does not hold of Isi. This is only a worker. If you hire a worker, he can eat all he wants, even if it's a higher wage. The Chachamim say anybody can come in and eat. They hold like Isi. Here is the question of the day. When the Torah says that a worker comes into your field, again, we learned if he's working b'mechuber, right, b'shas Gumar Malacha, when he's harvesting, he's allowed to, or if he's working with something which is detached while it's a work in process, before it's ready for Trumas and Meisers. So the question though is when he works, is he eating his own food? Like it's his own food, he's entitled to it, it's like part of his wages. Is it like wages? He gets $5 an hour or whatever it is now, $20 an hour. I've been saying $5 an hour for too many years, right? Probably it's the minimum wage is probably like $20 an hour now. I don't know. So is it like part of his wages, or is it something that God gave him as a gift? Is he eating his own, or is heaven giving him food? What's the nafkamina? Either way, he's entitled to eat it. The Amr, let's say, says, my wife and children aren't working here. but instead of the food that I'm entitled to, I'm going to give it to my wife and kids. What do you say? If he's eating his own, in other words, he's entitled to eat all he wants. Okay, he decided not to eat it himself. He put it in his bag and he wants to give it to his wife and kids. If it's his own, why not? If God granted him the ability or the right to eat all he wants, not the ability, the right to eat all he wants while he's working. Remember, as we said yesterday, maybe only from that same vine and the same tree, whatever. Hashem gave it to him. Hashem didn't give it to his wife and kids. Hashem gave it only to him. In other words, it's why you're working. A similar question, Kohanim, are they eating their own shares in the karbanos, or they're eating Mishal Shamayim? The nafkamina would be, do they own it, or whatever? It's like if you're invited to somebody's house and you're eating their food. Is it your food? Can you take it and put it in your pocket and take it home? No, you're eating their food. You're not entitled to take a doggy bag out, like they say in the hotels. No one is allowed to remove food from the dining room. It's not your food. You're entitled to eat all you want while you're there, but it's not yours. You can't take it with you. Of course, no. You have to tell that to the Jews. Okay. Anyway, that's the question. Tashma, we're going to try to bring a proof. That's what we're going to deal with the rest of the day, to try to prove, is he eating his own, like it's part of his wages, or is God gave it to him? God gave it to him, but he can't do anything that he wants with it. You could say also nafkamina could even makana shanisha with it. Same kind of a thing. Tashma. Ochel Paul Kisha Mishnah. Mishnah says that a worker can eat even expensive. Kisha Safilu, but then he can even eat $1 worth of cucumbers, like a seven safilu dinner, or dates, whatever, even $1 worth. Yeah, if he's eating of his own, would you say that if his wages is $1/6 of $1, that's his wage, and he can still eat $1? Does it make sense to say that he could eat so much more over his basic wage? So it must be that he's getting it from God. So the Gemara, even if it's God granted, comes still, does it make sense? You're saying he's eating from heaven's gift. So at the end of the day, this still makes sense. His wage is still $1/6 of $1, and he's going to get paid a whole $1, and he's going to eat $1 worth. What are you going to say? Hashem gave it to him. Hashem gave him that right in the Torah. The Torah says he's entitled. The question is, when he gave him that right, is it a gift to him and he could do what he wants with it? He can give it to his wife and kids or not. So he can't prove. Tashma. Let's look for the next part of the Mishnah. He shouldn't eat more than his wages. He's eating his own. He's eating his own. In other words, the Tanakam, this would be Rav Chisma, right? Would say that what? He shouldn't eat more than his schar. You're not going to say that he can eat more than his basic wage. His basic wage is $20 an hour. He should be able to eat more than that because he's eating his own. It's his own. It makes sense to say that if he's eating his own, he's entitled to his wage of $20 an hour plus whatever he can eat. But if you say he can eat, you can't eat more than $20 an hour's worth. You can't eat more than that. That makes sense if you say he's getting his own. It's his wage, and he's entitled to each keneged the wage, right? But not more than that. Whereas the Chacham say, no, you could eat all you want. Even if your wage is $20, you could eat $100 worth in that hour. Then because Hashem tells you could eat whatever he wants. It's more love. Everybody could say he's eating his own. Hashem gave it to him. The machlokas is the word kenafshecha. The pasuk says he should eat kenafshecha savecha. Mar savar kenafshecha b'davar shemosar. You're giving your life for this job. Sometimes your job involves digging in a mine or climbing on a cliff or a roof, and you might die. You're putting your soul out for it. So therefore, the Chacham say you can eat whatever you want. Your job is $20 an hour, but you're giving your life for this job. So therefore, Hashem said, even if you eat $100 worth, you could do it. But it's your money. You're entitled to eat it. You're entitled to take the $100 worth of food that you could have eaten in that hour and give it to your wife. Do whatever you want with it. You're entitled to whatever you want. Whatever it is. So therefore, you're entitled to more. You're entitled, even if it's worth a lot more. Not because Hashem gave it to you. It's really yours. But the question is, because it's yours, can you eat more than the $20 an hour? Yes, because you're devoting your life to it. So the Torah said you could eat even $100 worth. Whereas the who says no, you can only eat up to $20 an hour. He used the drush, we had the structure before. Just like you yourself, you're the owner. If you don't want to eat, you don't have to eat, right? You're not mechuyev the same way. If you prevent the worker from eating, you don't allow the worker to eat. You put a mask on him, or you don't allow him to eat at all. You're also patur. You're not supposed to. He's entitled to, but you're patur from punishment. So you can't prove anything there. Tashma, another proof. Nazir. Let's say Nazir's working in the grape field. Shouldn't be doing that, right? It's a little bit putting himself in a difficult situation, working grapes. Let's say he says, Tanu Leshti Abanai, give my food, I can't eat it, so give it to my children. Ain in my family, Ain Shomali, you don't listen to him. Yamrit Mishalo Wokal, if you say he's eating his own, am I in Shomalo? Must be that's God giving you. If it's his own, why can't he? He says, I can't eat it because I'm a Nazir, but give it to my wife. There's That's a famous line. We tell a Nazir, go around. We tell the Nazir, don't go near the vineyard. Don't put yourself in a situation, right? Don't tempt yourself. Go around the Carmelo secret. In other words, there we're telling him, the reason we say you can't give it to your wife and kids is because we're trying to discourage him from being a worker in the grape in the vineyard. We don't want him to work there because he might come to be over his Naziris. So there we say, give it to your wife and kids. No, you can't even do that. You're not entitled to anything. We want to discourage him from working there. Tashma, another proof. Poel, a worker, sounds like a regular worker. Again, if he's entitled to the food himself, Hashem gave it to him. Why can't he give it to his wife and kids? The answer is my Poel Nazar. There also means a Nazar. I Vatanya Nazar, Vatanya and Poel. We learn Nazar and we learn Poel. Sounds like they're two different things. He says, we learn them near each other. One place he called it a Nazar, one place he called it a Poel. But in both cases, we speak about a Nazar. So again, even though this seems to be a proof that it's min hashamayim, that he's getting the food from God, but it doesn't really belong to him, because if it would belong to him, why can't he give it to his wife and kids? That's Xera, because we don't want a Nazar to work in a grape field in a vineyard. So we tell him, we punish him. We don't allow him even to give it to his wife and kids. Tashma. How do we know you don't listen to a Paul who says that? Shnemer says, I'll tell you chalosita, don't put it into your own baskets. Right? So why doesn't he say over here, again, you can't take anything home? That sounds like if he was if the money was his own, right? So why can't he give it to his wife and kids? We said, we don't listen to him. It says, don't take anything home. Yeah, but if he's entitled to the $20 worth of grapes, why can't we speak about a Nazir? Why does he say Mishum Kelly Chlosita? And that's the reason why? That's not the reason. The reason is Mishum Lech Amr Nazira, because of that reason, because we want to discourage the Nazir from working in a vineyard. And the reason is because of discouraging him. Since we mentioned Lashon of Poel, because we use the pasuk of Poel, but really referring to a Nazir. These are dochik answers, because it really sounds like these are good proofs that the worker's not getting his own food. The food isn't given to him, which he can then distribute to his family. It sounds like he's eating from Shulchan Gavah, he's eating from God's table. Tashma, Hasocher is a Poel. It doesn't mean to say it's God's table, because it really belongs to the owner of the vineyard or the field or whatever. So it's not like Kachim, which is God's table. But it's the same idea that God's giving it to him. He's not entitled to give it away. While he's working in the field, he can eat, but God didn't give it to his family. Let's say a person was hired to dry figs. You take figs up to the roof and they dry. That means the figs have been cut down, but they're not processed yet. They're still being processed. Therefore, you're allowed to remember, you're allowed to eat. The worker's allowed to. Because since it's not a finished product yet, you're not chayav meiser. Let's say he says, he's making a deal. I'm working on the condition that I can eat and my children can eat. Or my son should eat as part of my wages. He himself could still eat in potter, because Hashem said a worker's allowed to eat in the field. And since it's a work in progress, it's not chayav meiser yet. But if his son eats, he has to give meiser. Why is that? If he's eating his own, why is he chayav? It belongs to him. And he's potter from meiser. Why should his son be chayav? Because it looks like a sale. One of the halachos we learned, it's a drabanan, that if you buy food, even if it's unprocessed, you're chayav in meiser, right? You're chayav in meiser if you buy it, it's unprocessed. And this looks like looks like a sale because he made a deal on the condition that I'm going to work, and what I'm going to, the food that's in the field, my son is a part of the condition, part of my wages is that I'm working in return for my wages and in return that my son could eat. So that's part of the deal. So it looks like a sale. So it's Xavier Drabanan. That's why you should give Meiser on the food that his son eats, because his son's entitled to eat, because that was the deal. He says, yeah, your son could eat, but he's got to take Meiser. Tashma, another proof. Let's say you hired a worker to work in Netravai. Netravai means the vineyard in the 4th year. You're not entitled to eat that. Right? You got to be poted. They shouldn't eat it. They shouldn't eat because you can't eat Netravai. You got to take it to Yerushalayim. Let's say he didn't let him know that it's the 4th year. The worker didn't know. He just hired him stam. Poda, then the owner has to redeem the Netravai. Netravai is like Meiser Sheni. You have to be poted for money, take the money to Yerushalayim, eat it there, or take the food to Yerushalayim. So what he could do, then if he didn't let him know, then he has to pota umachil, and then he can give it to him. If you're saying that it's God's, am I pota machil? Why would Hashem didn't give me isur. Hashem didn't say that you can eat, let's say, orla or neteravai. He didn't give him that. So if it's Hashem, what's it? If you say it's his, so he belongs to him, except you can't eat it, so the owner has to be poted for him. But if you're saying it's Hashem, Hashem wouldn't have given somebody isur. He was not entitled to eat that. If a man's working in, let's say, with pigs or something like that, or with it's got to be something that grows in the ground. But let's say arla, something grows in the ground, you're not entitled to eat it. So Hashem wouldn't give him that. And says Hashem there's a different reason. You're right. Really, maybe he's not entitled to eat it, and really, it's a mishmayim, but it looks like a mektos. You hired me to work on your field, and I know I'm entitled to eat food. Yet to eat while I'm working, and you didn't tell me that it's arla or that it's neteravai. That's something that I can't eat. So therefore, the owner has to owes him something. Therefore, the owner has to redeem it and let him eat it. If that's the reason, this parsway gula. Again, this is going to see this. This is tomorrow's Gemara. All this is in tomorrow's Gemara, Mishnah tomorrow. If that's the safest says in parsway, let's say his fig cakes had already been processed and they broke open, so they were already now. Once they're fully processed, they're chayv meiser. The worker's not entitled to eat that. But let's say the guy's fig cakes broke, and he told the worker, "I'm hiring you to put the fig cakes together." The worker did not necessarily know that they were already fully processed. He said, "I'm pressing fig cakes together," and he thought that it's a work in process, and he's entitled to eat. So aim is safe in this pasuk. Or in this pasuk, his barrels burst open. He shouldn't eat. Why? Because they're fully processed already. A worker's only entitled to eat from attached ground when he's harvesting it, or from detached ground if it's not fully processed. He's been processed already. If he didn't let him know that they're fully processed, he didn't let him know, then the same thing, ma'as or machilan. He's got to take meiser and then give it to him. Again, it's if you tell me that he's getting shemaim, amai ma'as or machilan, isur lo zachar rachmana. Hashem didn't give him isur. In other words, something which is fully processed and chayiv and meiser. Hashem didn't give him the ability to eat that. It looks like a mekach because he didn't tell him, the owner didn't tell him that it's not been processed yet. You're right. If the fig cakes broke up, because the fig cakes were pressed and they were their finished product, but then they fell apart. They fell down and they fell apart. So he comes and says, "Oh, you see these figs on the ground? Can you put them together, make fig cakes?" So he could have thought they weren't processed yet. If his barrels broke open, once they were in barrels already, they were chayiv and meiser. So he knew that he was hired to seal up put them in barrels again. He knew that it was fully processed. So how could he say that it's a mekach tos? I didn't know that they were fully processed already, and therefore I wouldn't be entitled to my mekach tos. Mediota did. He knows that they were already meiser because they were put in barrels. No, what happened was it wasn't like the barrels just cracked open, the top cracked open. They broke open into the pit of the vat the vat of the wine press. So he could have thought that it was wine that hadn't been put in barrels yet. As soon as it goes into the bor, you're chayiv and meiser. As Rabbi Kiva holds that you're only chayiv and meiser not when the wine in the process goes into the vat or the pit there, but rather from the time that the scum, the waste of the wine floats up to the top and is removed. So therefore, he thought it wasn't processed yet. They said, we didn't know that it was fully processed. He should have he could tell them, you should have thought maybe it already floated to the top. You're seeing wine over here, right? And wine, if in the vat, according to Tanakama, as soon as it's in the pit, you're chayiv in Meiser. You have to give Meiser. Okay, Rav Kiva holds it's only when the scum floats to the top. So maybe the scum had already floated to the top. Maybe it had already floated to the top. The answer is Ba'asr, the who gathered the nugget, the person who draws out the wine, meaning the one who buys it, he's the one who removes the scum. Hashatan Rav Zid, now that Rav Zid learns in the yeshiva of Oshia, Yain Mishior the bar B'yikba, Yain, when you chayiv and Meiser, when it goes into the pit, into the vat, and it floats. Rabbi Kiva Omer Misha Yishla B'chavios, from the time that it's a process, meaning the time that's removed in the barrels. I feel you don't say that it's speaking where the barrels emptied out, burst open, and the wine fell back into the bore. That even in the barrels, it has to be the scum has to be removed. And they could tell them we didn't know that the scum had been removed. That maybe you should have thought, possibly, you should have realized that this wine has been fully processed and you're not entitled to eat anything. So why is it mekachtos? And so in a place where the one who seals the wine, when he buys it, the one who seals it, he's the one who removes the scum. So in all these cases, the idea here is that the reason why the worker is entitled for the owner to take meiser and give it to him, even though it was either net or abai, or in the safe of these cases over here, it had been processed already in Yechayiv and Meiser, is because the workers didn't know it's mekachtos, and therefore the owner has a responsibility to do that, has a responsibility to take Meiser and give it to them, even though Mikra Adin, the owner is not entitled, the workers are not entitled to eat that food, either because it's net or abai, which we're not getting, which is usher to eat in its regular state, or because it's been processed already, it's Chayiv and Meiser. Tashma, another proof. We're still trying to prove this question. When the worker eats, is he eating his own? Meaning he says, okay, I'm entitled to these fruits. Oh, you know what? I'm going to give it to my wife and kids. Is that okay? Is it he's eating his own? Or is he eating from Hashem's table and he's not entitled to give away? Tashma, kotis chadam al yidei atzmo. A person can stipulate, a worker can stipulate with the owner. He says, you know what? We're not going to eat. I want a bigger wage. Instead of $20 an hour, I want $25 an hour. We're not going to eat. Tashma, kotis al yatz. You can do it for himself like they know, you do it for his kids. My kids are going to be working over here. They're 20 years old. They know how to work in the field. I want $25 an hour. Not going to eat. I have them for his servants also. I for his wife. Because even though these are adults, but they know what's going on. They could be mochel. They could say, yeah, we'd rather get the higher money. If he does that, he could do it for them too. He can't do it for his young children, right? Because he can't take away if they're working, they're entitled to the food. And he can't do it for his animal. The animal is those sachin shor b'disho. You can't make a deal and say my animal's not going to eat. What do you mean an animal's not going to eat? The Torah said he can eat. Can't do that. Because the animals or the children don't have any das. You can't stipulate for them. Where the father himself, the man who's making the deal, the father, the poel who's making the deal for his family and his animals, etc. He's feeding them. So he could say, listen, I want $25. We're not going to eat anything. I want $25 an hour for each one. If God is granting him the food, right? That's why he can't make a deal for his children. Why? Because for the young children, for the abad of time, because a Paul Cotton what is being mochel? The young child is the Evet Cotton is only is zoch in the food when he eats it. He doesn't have no shchiyah before that. So if Hashem is granting him, that's why he can't make a deal for the children. If he's eating his own, meaning if he's feeding them, therefore the food that they're going to get from the field when they work the field belongs to the worker, right? Let him make a deal for the Tanim also, because he's feeding these young slave children anyway. So if he's feeding them, why can't he make a deal and say, listen, these young children are going to work out in the field with me, and they're going to get, I want a higher wage for them because they're not going to eat. Why can't he do that? So in other words, if you say that they're dependent on that food because they own the poel is not feeding them, the master of these stores is not feeding them. All right, so therefore you can't make a deal for them because they can't. What are they going to eat? If their boss is not feeding them, the boss now is the worker in the field, and he can't make a deal. They're not old enough to say we're mochel the food, but if he's feeding them, if we're assuming we're feeding them, why can't he make a deal? If you say that it's why that's why because Hashem said you can't make a deal on their behalf. But if he's feeding them and basically he gets to keep their wages also, if it's his wages and his food he's entitled, why can't he make a deal for them? Speaking where the boss, meaning the owner of not the boss of the field, but the owner of the slaves, he's not feeding them. If he's not feeding them, we're assuming if he's not feeding them, he can't say, work for me and I'm not going to feed you, right? They have no other income. He can't say, work for me and I can feed him. He's not giving him food. If that's the case, why can he, if he's not feeding his workers, his avodim, why can he make a deal for the Gedolim and say, they're going to work also for $25 with no food? So the Gedolim are older and they could be mochel. So if he makes a deal for them and they're mochel, that's fine. But young children can't be mochel. Ivatan Rav Oshia learns it differently. He says all of them are the same except for Eviktanim. A person can stipulate this deal of $25 an hour, no food. Not for his animal, low sachsom. He can make a deal for his dolim for his children. Not for the tanim because he can't make a deal for them. He can't make a deal. But code says and he could make a deal for his eved shifcha knanim. Bang dol bang tanim. The difference over here between Rav Hoshia and the Tanakama and the first Brisa, or between it's really a Mishnah. Our Mishnah is going to be on tomorrow's daf is avodim tanim. That the Mishnah says you can't make a deal about them because they can't be mochel. They can't be mochel. They're not entitled to the food right now. Rav Hoshia says you can. My love, how Rav Hoshia says you can make a deal if you're not feeding them? My love, those aren't both speaking about where you're giving them food. One holds mishalo ochel. He's eating his own, meaning the worker is entitled to eat the food. It's his food. He can do whatever he wants with it. Therefore, if he's feeding his slave and the food is his, he can make whatever deal he wants. Umar savar mishal shemai mochel. No, whereas our Mishnah holds, our Mishnah which says you cannot make a deal for avodim tanim is because he's getting God's food and God doesn't allow him to do that. So maybe this child that we have, maybe it's a machlok between the Mishnah and the Brisa. It says, everybody holds he's eating his own. Meaning, again, that the food that the worker gets is his own food. He can do what he wants with it. Lo kasha. Kam shei mal mazonos. Our Mishnah speaking about where he's not feeding the slaves. He's not feeding the slaves. He can't tell them to work for nothing. And therefore, he can't make a deal on their behalf and say they're going to work without food because he's not feeding them. Therefore, he's not entitled to take away their wages or whatever food they're going to get from working in the field. Bryce is speaking where he's feeding them. Therefore, he's entitled to their wages, just like he's entitled to wages. He's entitled to their food, and he can make such a deal. So the Gemara says, if you're saying the Bryce is speaking where he's giving him food, why did Rav Hoshia say that avodim ktanim you can make a deal for them? Because since you're feeding them, you're entitled to make any deal. Just like their wages belong to you, their food belongs to you because you're feeding them. So the food that they get in the field from working is part of their wages. You're entitled to that too. You can take it away. Why can't you also, if you're feeding them, you're feeding your children also? Why can't you make a deal on behalf of your own children? Hashem didn't give the tsar of the tsar. You're getting the money, yes, but they're going to have tsar. If your children are working out in the field, your 6-year-old kid's working out in the field, he wants to eat something. If he can't eat, he's going to be mitzari. He's picking apples or picking figs or whatever, or wheat, whatever it is, and he's going to have tsar if he can't eat. Hashem did not give him the ability to be mochel, the tsar of his kids. That wasn't given over to him. But the avodim tanim, their tsar we're not concerned about, and therefore, if you're feeding them, you're entitled to their wages, and you're entitled to make such a deal. So it's more of my conversation. But if our Mishnah is speaking about the Mishnah that was quoted at the beginning, Tashma Kotzes on my Datsmo, which is really tomorrow's Gemara, the next Mishnah. If the Amish is speaking about where you're not feeding them, b'shein la mazonos, and therefore you can't make a deal on behalf of Avodim Tanim. That's good if you hold that a boss the owner cannot tell an Eved, work for me and I'm not going to feed you. Can't do that if you're not feeding him and you're not entitled to take away his food. Shopper, if you hold like Rabbi Yochanan, who says that an owner of a slave can tell the slave, you have to work for me because I own you. Even if I don't feed you, you can do that. Michael and Amer. So why can't he make a deal on behalf of the Avodim also, even if he's not feeding them? This makes in both cases, the Bryce and the Mishnah are speaking about where he's not giving him food. The Marsav Yochel, very simple. Our Tana holds that you cannot tell a worker, work for me, and I'm not going to feed you. You cannot tell the slave, work for me, and I'm not going to feed you. Therefore, you can't make a deal on behalf of the Avadim Tanim. Whereas Rav Hoshia's Bryce holds, yeah, you could make such a deal, and that's why you can make a deal for the Avadim Tanim, because you're entitled to the wages even if you don't feed them. Says the Gemara, so if that's the case, Rabbi Yochanan says that an owner could say to the Eved, you're going to work for me, I'm not going to pay you. Shavak Masis Brisa. Does it make sense that he holds like the Brisa against the Mishnah? The Mishnah is more authoritative than the Brisa. So why would he hold like the Mishnah who says Ein Yachol, and he would not hold like the Mishnah, and he would hold like the Brisa? Does that make sense? You don't want to say that. Ella, that's not the machlok. So everybody holds. Now we're going to say both the Bryce and the Mishnah hold that he's eating from heaven. And he can't make such a deal because Hashem didn't give him the right to be mochel the food that children are going to eat on the field. The adults, you can be mochel and say, okay, in return for the food, we're going to get $25 an hour, but you can't do that for the children. My kotzeis, what did Rav Shapiro meant? And then Rav Shapiro, you could be kotzeis. He meant something else. Mazonas, he meant to say not the kotzeis is I'm going to make a deal, stipulate I want a higher wage and no food, but rather he could tell the owner, feed these kids before they go out in the field so that they won't eat in the field. That's kind of kotzeis that we mentioned before. Oh, you go feed them before so they won't be hungry. Rav Shapiro, mazonos. If that's the case, so why do you say by an animal you can't do that? You can always tell the owner also, we said before, the owner, if he wants, could feed the animals before they go out in the field. Why can't you buy animals too? We can't mean that. Ella, we go back to what we said originally. That's the machlokes between the Brisa and the Mishnah. The Mar Savim Mishalo Ochel, or Mar Savim Mishal Shamayim Ochel. The Tanakama, our Mishnah holds that he's eating Mishal Shamayim, the pole. Therefore, he's not entitled to take away. He can make a deal for himself. He can say, listen, I'm entitled to eat. My adult children over here, they're 20 years old. My wife, my adult slaves, all these people, they know what they're doing. They'd rather get a higher wage and not food. Okay, we all agree, no problem. Can't make a deal like that for a cotton because he doesn't know. He doesn't understand it. You can make a deal because it's not yours to make a deal with. The food doesn't belong to you that they're going to eat. The food that the children are going to eat in the field doesn't belong to you. It belongs to God. God gave it to them. He doesn't give you a right to make a deal. Whereas Hoshea says, no, it belongs to you. So it comes out that this shiloh that we had, when a worker out eats in the field, is he eating his own, which he can give it to somebody else, Makadosh and Isha with it, give it to his wife and kids, whatever. So, or does it mean Hashemayim? That's machlokes between the Mishnah and the Brisa. Our Mishnah holds that it's min Hashemayim, and the Brisa holds that it belongs to him. All right, we'll pick up the Mishnah tomorrow, Mr. Shem. Have a good day. To say what? No, it could say that you can't. It could mean that you can't store a lot. You could take everything out. Listen, the Tanakama and Rav Osha says you could even eat as much as you want, whatever it is. I mean, you shouldn't take a whole bunch home, but whatever you're entitled to eat out in the field, if you want, you can give that to your wife and kids.